We just finished watching episode 3 of the Bleach 1000-Year Blood War arc, and today I want to pretty much go through this episode, break it all down, and talk about everything in it, right? Some changes in the manga, all of the good stuff. So let's get started, alright? So a few opening notes, of course, is that this is Bleach, episode 3 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc of it, but episode 369 overall. This episode's title is March of the Star-Cross, and this episode loosely adapts chapters 489 to 494 of the manga, right? I say loosely because of how it all plays out in the end, but I'll talk about that whenever I get to the end, and I'll talk about what was included in the manga, what wasn't included in the manga, and sort of things that just didn't quite happen the way they happened in the anime, the way the anime put it, right? But pretty much we start off this episode right in the spot where the last episode had ended, right? Ichigo had just made it back over to Opie, and pretty much just was like, alright, he just defeated all of the Trasbista, right? And it looks like me and him are going to fight now, right? Of course, he's got Nell with him too. And then we see that Quigleope, he's saying some stuff, and he mentions that Ichigo is actually a special threat in a doctrine that the Quincy King Yuhabok sent out, right? And Ichigo's like, what do you mean by that? And says some stuff, right? And at this point, we cut back to the Soul Society, right? This was a moment that actually happened in chapter 388, right? But wasn't expanded on until the full extent it is here, right? With pretty much the all of the captains in a captain's meeting, and not Yuabak, what's his name? Old Man Yamamoto is just like, hey, we need to prepare for war. These are Quincy's. We know their power. We know what evil they have done. Every captain, every squad needs to be ready, because while they say they will attack in 5 days, we can't always believe them, right? At this point, the opening plays. Same opening again. It's a Scar by Tatsuya Kitani, right? And opening plays, I still don't have really much of an opinion on this opening. I mean, it's fine. It's not like amazing, right? But it works for the purpose as an opening that it wants to get across, right? After the opening, we go back to the fight in Hueco Mundo, right? Where, what's his name? Quigleope gets out his bow and starts to attack Ichigo, right? He starts off by firing some reishi bullets at Ichigo, and Ichigo just catches one of these and just throws it back as a massive explosion happened on the ground, right? At this point, Orihime and Chad show up, right? And Ichigo just throws over Nell to Orihime since he can't really deal with Nell while he's fighting Opie, right? There's some more attacks to go back and forth, and Ichigo makes a remark to how his power is a bit stronger than Uryu's, right? And at this point, what ends up happening is, what's his name? Opie sort of makes remarks saying, yeah, no, that can't be right. That can't be right whatsoever, right? And he also remarks about how he knows who Ishida is, and Ichigo's like, what does this mean? Right? And as you're doing this, they just fight back and forth, right? And eventually, they just keep going back and forth until Opie reveals his true power, right? And as Ichigo thinks back, and he's like, oh, I remember his power. Uryu used it, right? And they keep going back and forth until Opie grabs out his Let's Steal, or as we also know, the true name of it, the Volstenditch, right? This is a power that pretty much exemplifies everything a Quincy can do, right? And that's what it used to do here, is just show what this has, right? But then we cut over to the Wanderwitch, right, or the Vandenreich, or whatever you want to call them, right? We cut over to the Invisible Army of all the Quincy's, right? As we see Yuhabok, right, and he's standing there, and he's just trying to tell everybody oh, Ichigo Kurosaki is now fighting Opie? Alright then, you know what that means? We are going to invade the Soul Society, right? As he tells all of the Stern Reader, his elite force pretty much, to go and stand by the Sun Gate so they can infiltrate the Soul Society, right? At this point, we got that like break that's normally scheduled in the episode. It just pops up. We've got a little thing about the Quincy's as a whole, and something just on Ichigo real fast, right? Not a whole lot to mention there, right? And Ichigo and Opie just keep on attacking each other, right? Just don't really stop. And there's a note about how Ichigo's just like, is this what this Volston dick power looks like? Because if somebody like Uryu used it, I just cut him down for looking so stupid and creepy, right? At this point, Opie just comes back and retorts with, it should be creepy to all of you menacing Soul Society, Soul Reapers, and all of that stuff, right? At this point, they just keep just fighting back and forth, right? He eventually uses a power called the Amur Strix, right? And it starts to peel away like Orihime's power, right? It just starts to pull it away from her, just like peel it off in a way. We also learned that this name of the attack is called Piscal, right? And as this is happening, Ion, the big monster that the Trisbeasta can summon by giving up their 3 left arms, right, attacks him. And at this point, we just see that Opie is just getting destroyed by all of this, right? Eventually, we then cut over to Uryu, right? As Uryu is looking in the library of where he lives, and he's just like looking through everything, trying to figure out what is going on with, because at this point he sort of realized that the Quincy's are here, right, and that they are invading. So he just tries to find an answer, right? Eventually Ryukin finds him and starts to scold him because of, hey, my son shouldn't be looking for this. It's not his problem. Why is he doing it, right? And at this point, Uryu's like, I should be the last Quincy. Tell me how to find this, please. As Ryukin just tells Uryu, the answer will not be found here, right? At this point, we cut over to the Soul Society, where we see Shino and Ryunosuke getting ready to get all of the information about the barracks, right? They're getting ready to defend against the upcoming Quincy attack, as we see a new Soul Society guy that I don't think we've seen before. His name is Kajumaru, right? He really looks like Aizen, so I'm just going to call him Aizen Lookalike, right? Well, Aizen Lookalike pretty much comes up as Ryunosuke and Shion are talking about why are the Quincy's and the Soul Reapers at war during all of this, right? And pretty much during this, we go back and forth between this Aizen Lookalike dude reading, telling the two of them why this has happened, and Uryu, who finally realizes what his dad meant is that it would be in his private quarters. The answer would be there, right? So Uryu goes looking and he finds it. So we sort of cut between Uryu reading this book and Aizen Lookalike pretty much talking to Rion and Shion to learn about the Quincy's backstory, right? It's pretty much that they were both at odds in what they do, of course, right? And eventually they try to talk it out, talks didn't go through. So there was this idea that Soul Society have of the Quincy Extermination Act, right? And that at that point there was no choice but for the two sides to fight and war on forever, and just all of that, right? And as Shion and Ryunosuke are hearing this, they're like, well, what does that mean? Are they the bad guys? Are we the bad guys? And what this Aizen Lookalike dude says is, there's no right answer for either side. It's either self-defense or total conquest, right? At this point, we cut over to Yamamoto and Mayuri, who are talking to each other, and we learned what happened to all of those people in the Rukon district. Mayuri's Division 12 just like exterminated all of them, right, to keep the balance of souls in check, and Yamamoto starts to scold Mayuri about this until Mayuri retorts with some stuff and eventually says, hey, this all is happening because of what you didn't do 1,000 years ago. You didn't kill that man. as we sort of cut to Yuhabak in the sky above the Soul Society, right? And at this point, we cut back over to the battle in Hueco Mundo. What's it called? Ion, the big monster created by the Trespias, right, is just attacking Olpi, right? And at this point, he just starts going crazy, and all of the Tres Beasts are like, oh, it looks like we beat him, ha ha ha, as the main one starts to walk forward, and Olpi just stabs her straight through, right? And at this point, Olpi stands up and he's like, oh, look at this. Looks like His Majesty needs to adjust the strength of our blute, right? As he snaps his head back in place because it was clearly dislocated, right? He just snaps it back, and he starts just taking reishi from everything, just absorbing it into his crown that is used for his Volstendig. And at this point, we learn that the name of this move is a Shaklavarai, right? And it just takes reishi from everything, like everything. Like it's taking it from Orihime's dome again, right? It's taking it from Ion. It's just taking it from everything. It takes it from Chad's arm. It takes it from all of the environment around him, right? And we see that all of this reishi just pours into Olpi, and it changes and modifies him, and eventually at the end of it, he looks like Ion, right? He's got like a big monster, he's all deformed, right? And then Ichigo comes up behind Olpi and just snaps the crown at the top of his head, effectively destroying the power, and while he still has the form, he's no longer able to take reishi and gather it into him like he once was, right? At this point, there's more of a battle, right? And Ichigo reveals that he ended up using his Bankai to get behind him, right? As we then cut over to Urahara, who is running with Donda, Chaka, and Pesci to aid in the battlefield as Urahara feels something. And as he feels something, we cut back to the Soul Society, where Yuhabak is once again standing in the sky above the Soul Society, right? And then we get Uryu getting confronted by Ryukin for finding this book in his private quarters, as we cut back to the Soul Society, where Kajumaru, right, the Aizen lookalike guy, is standing there talking to Reno's Genshion as Gestalt begins, right? Massive pillars of reishi just rain down everywhere and just absolute destroy a bunch of things in the Soul Society, right? We cut over to a bunch of the lieutenants, right? And a bunch of them are just getting ready to fight, as we see Izuru Kira, the third squad lieutenant, just get a hole punched straight through his side, right? It just absolutely destroys him, right? And it's just a massacre, as we see a Stern Raider there in the center. I know his name, so I'm just going to call it by it, right? Oh, geez, what is his name? Oh, yeah, it's Hashwolf, right? Hashwolf is standing there, and he pretty much says some stuff saying, hey, we're the Stern Ritter. We will exterminate everybody here in the Soul Society. And at this point, the episode ends as we get the ending again. Satellite by Senrin. It plays in the background. Again, I don't have much of an opinion on this outro, but hey. And at this point, the episode is officially done, right? My thoughts on this episode are as follows. I think it's good, as we'll get to here in a second. It still keeps the trend of rearranging many of the things in the manga, right? And in some situations, I feel like this really works. Instead of just having one drawn-out battle in Hueco Mundo, it's just going back and forth between a bunch of interesting conflicts that are going on in, like, at this point, all 3 and maybe 4 of our regions that we're focusing on, right? We've got the World of the Living, the Soul Society, the Invisible Palace, and Hueco Mundo. It just really does good by shifting between all of these, right? I still, think that it's really unfair, how much power these Quincy's have, right? As we see here, just, the links that Olpi goes through just to make sure that, he can attack correctly. It's really insane just how much he does, right? We know the title for next episode is going to be Kill the Shadow, right? So that's the chapter title at some point. There's a whole series of chapters here that are called March of the Star Cross, which is all about Ichigo fighting Olpi, right? And it's the whole thing there. As for manga changes, there's pretty much scenes are just really moved around, right? At the beginning of chapter, 489, we've got a scene of all of the lieutenants talking to each other, right, through around the entire thing. We don't have that whatsoever, right? So the first time we see most of the lieutenants, like Rukia and everybody, is just not even focused around here, right? It's just not really normal. And also, there's no scene yet in the manga of Uryu talking with Ryukin. It just hasn't happened yet. And, yeah, that's really all I gotta say. If you guys enjoyed this episode, we'll be back next week with Bleach episode altogether 370, I think, and episode 4 of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Again, it'll be called Kill the Shadow, but, again, this episode was, episode number 369, episode 3 of the arc, and it was titled March of the Starcross. And, we'll see you next time. Glowplasma231 out.